Hello, you're watching the Open RAN Summit, part of our year-round DSP Leaders coverage. I'm Guy Daniels, and today's discussion considers the future of Open RAN. How might its development change to reflect commercial realities? How will it be integrated into the generational evolution of mobile systems? And what is the future roadmap for Open RAN? Well, to answer these questions, I'm joined on the program today by Ian Hood, CTO, Chief Strategist, Global Industries for Red Hat; Petr Lédl, VP, Head of Network Trials and Integration Lab and Chief Architect of Access Disaggregation Program at Deutsche Telekom; Matteo Fiorani, Head of Distributed Unit and Infrastructure at Ericsson; Rick Mostaert, Vice President of Product Management RAN for Mavenir; Beth Cohen, SDN Network Product Strategy at Verizon Business Group; and Patrick Lopez, Founder and CEO of Core Analysis. Hello everyone, it's good to see you all. What a great panel we've got today. Now, as I mentioned, we are looking at the future of Open RAN. So let me first of all ask, how have our expectations changed in what's been a relatively short lifetime for Open RAN? What hasn't quite worked out, and what unexpected new ideas have come to the fore? Ian, perhaps we could come across to you for your thoughts first.
Well, I think what we've got to do first is think about Open RAN as a tool in the path on the journey to an open software-defined autonomous system. That's kind of the first thing. It's a tool on a path. And if we sort of look at the things that have changed over the last couple of years, some of the actual commercial parties have changed in terms of what's up first. Because initially, TCO was kind of at the top, and that was kind of one of the things people looked at, along with performance and latency, things like that. But now kind of the focus is evolving to how do we take advantage of this and enable enterprise revenues and also increase consumer market share and go after that quality of experience. So that's kind of one of the changes there. And while, they didn't go away, TCO is still high on the list, but now we've got automation to improve operation efficiency and the whole lifecycle management. These are still sort of the key factors, right? And so the things that have kind of taken us longer in the industry is to get to the point where we sort of say, you know what, we now can deploy this at scale, meet the performance, and the economics are kind of where they need to be over time. So we've kind of evolved to kind of that point. And we've also got a very strong ecosystem, because we've got, multiple partners, supporting it. And this is kind of where we're headed to actually go do this. And we can do this without compromise on the performance, and also on the front haul costs.
Well, thanks very much, Ian. Great summary of where we are at the moment, but let's get some other views on this. And Rick, let me come across to you first. What's your perception? How have expectations changed? What's been good? What's been bad?
I think from my perspective, some of the good things are, I'll start with the good, is the ecosystem has exploded. Companies that are coming into, the amount of engineering talent, innovation. If you look at companies like NVIDIA, Intel, Amazon, everybody's in. We're publishing, I think on LinkedIn, you can follow John Baker and see the ecosystem. And that is new. We need that fresh influx of ideas and product to come in. So that's been fantastic. I think another thing that's been more prevalent lately, and I think the prior speaker mentioned, operational efficiencies and things like that. And now with AI, open interfaces looking northbound, critical for, again, other companies come in and innovate on top of existing infrastructure, existing deployments. What I would say probably hasn't gone, and it's getting better, but it's been a little slow, is I think the radios, ecosystem on the radio side started off very slow. In fact, to the point where we had to, at Mavenir, actually create radio to fill gap. And hopefully we see all the vendors come in with open radios, because that'll really, enable true diversity in the supply chain, true diversity in the vendor ecosystem on the RAN side, which is what I think the operators are really looking forward to.
Great. Thanks so much indeed, Rick, for your comments there. And I know all of our guests want to come in on this opening questions. So let me first of all go to Matteo. Matteo, what are your thoughts of how expectations have changed?
Thanks, Guy. I think that Open RAN is maturing, as the previous speaker also said. I think definitely we see a very strong uptake. We see a number of things happening. As also mentioned before, cloud infrastructure are maturing a lot. So they go from being optimized for data centers also being optimized for RAN. For example, we start seeing strong solution for deploying single server system. That is one of the big challenges at the beginning for cloud infrastructure to scale down to distributed RAN deployment, which is fundamentally new for that type of applications. Then we see hardware platforms coming in. Of course, Intel has a very mature platform, but then we see now that there are also other challenges coming in with very strong solution, such as, for example, NVIDIA and many others. And a lot of focus also on the automation aspects, of course, as mentioned before, with a lot of our apps vendor, for example, trying to enter the business with their own application to try to make things work. Of course, this is complex, so it will still take time for this ecosystem to fully mature, but we see a strong progress in line with the expectation, definitely.
Great. Thanks very much, Matteo. Patrick, let's come across to you because it's only been a couple of months since you published your state of the market report on Open RAN. So what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Guy. I think I'll just talk about things that haven't gone fast enough. Obviously, we heard about a lot of progress and a lot of innovation on the Open RAN field. From my perspective, what hasn't progressed fast enough has been actually operators and carriers' posture towards Open RAN, in the sense that, Open RAN is a transformative project for a network operator, in the sense that you have to have a cloud-native infrastructure. You have to have the processes, the tools, the training in place in order to be able to deploy that. And also, one of the desires of Open RAN was the ecosystem, multiplicity of vendors, the ability to pick and choose a solution from various vendors. And in order to do that, you need to be able to integrate them. And I think that, Open RAN is not a spectator sport, but not all, but many operators have been kind of waiting for others to actually do the hard work of doing the integration and the deployments before they can jump in. And I think that it's probably not the best approach, because in order to benefit the most from Open RAN, you need to operate it. And to operate it, you need to actually integrate it yourself, probably.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Well, luckily we have two operators on the panel. So first of all, Petr, let me come across to you. Integration is very close to your heart and your job. What are your thoughts on how expectations have changed?
Thanks. I think that I agree to the picture that was outlined by predecessors here. You are right in terms of integration, that this is a challenge that we need to tackle. And from PT perspective, we are also believing in the industry cooperation in this space to develop a framework providing a certification and badging regime that would allow to decrease the integration cost that is related to necessary testing and alignment. So to a large extent, we can do it once in cooperation, and then maybe remaining 20% we leave for the individual operator efforts that is pretty much attributed to their individual needs. So that's one, I think, challenge. The other thing that I would like to call out here as well is that from our perspective, architecturally, that we are really calling for the horizontally layered architecture and implementation. We really want to move away from the vertically integrated silos, even if we adopt approaches like Cloud RAN. So for that, what is needed is also acceleration of management interfaces. So management interfaces not only to network functions, but also to cloud infrastructure as an enabler, and that will allow us to adopt really independent management plane. And in this sense, this is something where we are also investing to explore own development in the space of SMO solutions, and this is really an opportunity that we see new and bringing potentially benefits.
Great, thanks very much, Peter. And Beth, let's come across to you and hear your thoughts for this opening question.
So I want to add, the sixth, right? One of the things that I'm very hopeful about is that it's a cooperative effort between the vendors as well as the operators. So that always, that's really what needs to happen to make it success. Because, if the vendors are getting together and not talking to the operators, or the operators are doing it separately, which the operators really can. But I do know that the operators are participating actively in providing the requirements and providing the support to make sure that the Open RAN initiative is successful. And I think there's a high degree of motivation to make it as, taking advantage of open source as much as possible, and the disaggregation that cloud architectures and infrastructures facilitate, with, and incorporate all the newer technologies to make sure that that Open RAN is successful. Obviously, the interface with the radios is always the tricky part, because, at some point you need to touch on the hardware. But, I'm very hopeful that this will be a successful project. I do be aware that, we need to make sure that everything's secured. We need to have hooks to allow us to incorporate into our back-end systems, our OSS systems, our BSS systems, as well as make sure that the architecture is compatible with our underlying other cloud architectures.
Thanks very much, Beth, and thank you everyone for those comments. And Ian, I'm going to quickly come back to you because we started with you. Do you want to quickly come back with a comment there?
Yeah, I did. One of the things that Patrick mentioned I think is really important, and that is that operators really need to kind of control their own destiny here and become sort of the integrators along with their partners in building this out in this multi-vendor world. That's kind of the first thing. And I think the other thing that, because we've learned so much from building our LTE networks and our 5G core networks in this same manner, and built reference architectures for it and kind of gone through that process, gone through the automation, the lifecycle management efforts, the complexity that we think we have is not as difficult as people have been making it out to be. So for those who haven't actually started yet, and kind of wait for the others, they really need to kind of take a page out of those who've actually gone ahead and are kind of driving this, who've actually kind of solved some of these things. So that's where I see kind of the ones who kind of said, I'm going to start now because I can't really wait. Have I got the advantage of what they're going to go do? And those who are kind of sitting on the sidelines, they really need to just get started.
Great. Thanks very much, Ian. Well, let's kick on because there's a lot of ground we want to cover today. My next point is whether or not this has been technically more complex than we originally thought. Have we perhaps over-engineered Open RAN? And Patrick, let me come across to you first.
Well, thanks, Guy. I don't know. I've been working almost 25 years in telecoms, and Open RAN doesn't feel really more complex than other technologies that have been introduced. What's different about Open RAN is that a lot of that technology used to be closed, proprietary. So the complexity was there, but it was hidden because it was basically managed by the vendors, but it's always been there. Now, by creating an open and disaggregated network for the first time in the RAN. Basically, you're exposing that complexity, but with the benefit of having many vendors and many operators looking at it at the same time and proposing an architecture, a set of interfaces and protocols that are open, which actually removes complexity in the sense that, well, now they're better understood. And if you look at the journey of Open RAN, I think it's remarkable to see that particularly the front hall interface, which was probably one of the first work items of the technology, and that was at the beginning hotly contested, and there were a lot of doubt, is not even something that we talk about anymore, or at least in its current version for Category A, in the sense that now everyone takes more or less for granted that the integration between a virtual CUDU vendors and an RU vendor following the specification of the ORAN Alliance, well, you're going to do testing, but the integration itself, the heavy lifting of that, that's pretty much gone. So I'm just looking forward to see that same level of maturity going through each of the layer of Open RAN, the backhaul, the mid-haul, and interfaces with SMO and near real-time and non-real-time rate. But I think it's progressing in the right direction. So I answering your question again, I don't think it's been over-engineered. I think that it's been engineered properly because now you have a variety of vendors that are able to compete on the same field with the same open interfaces, and we're seeing that the integration efforts are accelerating.
Great, thanks very much, Patrick. Maybe the question is really is whether or not we expect too much, or we still expect too much, rather than the like over-engineering side of it. But let's get some other views on this. And Beth, let me come across to you next.
So where I see, I wouldn't say it's over-engineered, but I think it's different engineered, and it's something that I think both the vendors and the telecoms have needed to overcome the hurdle of having a different skill set. So working with open software, working with disaggregation, working with cloud architectures and infrastructure is a different mindset. It requires a different set of skills. And I think particularly in the beginning, there was a lot of need to pivot, certainly within the telecom industry. But I can see that the telecom industry has embraced that approach. And I know Open RAN is based on the container architecture rather than the virtual machine architecture. The containers themselves and Kubernetes still have significant gaps that need to be addressed in terms of supporting multi-interfaces and other types of basic telecom requirements. But the good news is that the CNCF is, in fact, supporting these new architectures and understand they're important to the telecom industry. I just attended the One Summit last week and attended an entire day of workshop activities around Open RAN. But there was a lot of cross-pollination with a number of the other projects. So I was very heartened to see that. More to come.
Thanks, Beth. I like that. Engineered differently. We've got some more views. So, Ian, let's come to you next, and then we'll go around over the guests. So, Ian first.
Yeah, I want to kind of follow on Beth's comments there that it requires this different set of skills, and that's really kind of what has really kind of made it difficult for the operators to kind of upskill their teams and become confident in deploying these technologies and learning how to go deploy in this, I'll call it, differently engineered kind of world. But we have kind of seen, that's an overrating, but I have to say we've kind of had what I would call feature creep, over time of where the goalposts are and what is kind of our first, foray into what we're going to get done so we can actually, get further down this path versus adding other things that, yes, they'll become useful to add more value to get to that enterprise services and AI and those things. But I think we've hardened enough of it now to kind of, know where those things come. And with the work, as Beth mentioned as well, with the other working groups, the security groups and the other aspects of, these things, I think we're closing in on a lot of those gaps that people were concerned about. And I'm seeing, I'll call it less feature creep now than we had early on.
Good to hear. Thanks very much, Ian. And we'll come to Rick in a moment, but and also to Matteo. But Petr, let's come to you next. Over-engineered or feature creep or just differently engineered? What's your thoughts?
So I would say also that it is not really over-engineered. I would say it's more complex. It is also more complex for us as operators to integrate and deploy and manage. But I would also like to highlight, and this is also why I would say that it's not over-engineered. I would highlight the work that was done in the O-RAN Alliance, because this community has been working diligently to simplify that process. So by providing architecture design, interfaces specifications for key interfaces, test specifications, for potential compliance and interoperability. So I think this was great help to navigate us through the complexity as much as possible.
Interesting. Thanks very much, Petr. And Matteo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, what I would like to do is a bit summarize the key takeaway from the previous speakers, because I agree basically with fundamentally everything they said. And I think one takeaway is fundamentally that no, it has not been over-engineered, but rather it has exposed the complexity of building telecom systems that before was not fully exposed because was handled within single vendor deployments. So that is the fundamental aspect. Then maybe the thing I would like to add is that the integration comes in different shapes and forms, because in the O-RAN Alliance architecture, there are multiple interfaces and multiple touch points. So there is one aspect being the vertical integration of the software on the cloud and hardware platform that I think is the one that has been tackled the most, and I think is the one that is getting more mature. Second point would be the integration more on the horizontal domain, for example, on the software toward a radio, on the frontal interface. And that is what is also maturing, especially on the Cat-A and the remote radios. Maybe some more work to do on the massive MIMO, but on the remote and the Cat-A, as Patrick mentioned before, it is maturing. The last piece that I think is very important and we need to see some maturation on is on the management interfaces. Those are still in early days, and I think we have not seen so much in multi-vendor in those aspects. So that is where we would like to see more maturation going forward.
So, Rick, has this been more complex than we originally thought? Have we perhaps over-engineered Open RAN?
No, I don't think it's been over-engineered at all. In fact, I think a lot of people thought it would be complex, but through experience, we've actually discovered that the interfaces are very well defined, and we've had a lot of success doing integrations. And in fact, we've seen large-scale deployments now where multiple vendors have come together. The KPIs are very good. It works very well. So absolutely not over-engineered. And just one more point I'd like to add is it's not just about the open front haul. We've seen a lot of innovation and openness within the whole RAN stack. For example, we have multiple vendors now coming in at layer 1. And by using the FAPI small cell forum FAPI interface, we've been able to integrate multiple layer 1 chipsets into our DU software. And we see that happening across the industry as well. So the complexity's always been there, like somebody else mentioned. We've opened it and exposed it, and by doing that, we've actually made it quite achievable to see the multi-vendors come into the ecosystem here. So absolutely not over-engineered. It's been working very well in our experience.
Thanks very much, Rick, and thanks everyone for those comments. Now, might we see more mainstream governance and specification development activities? For example, moving more work into 3GPP, perhaps. Matteo, can I come across to you for your thoughts on this one first?
Yeah, that is an excellent question, actually. I would start by saying a little bit of about the O-RAN Alliance and the tremendous progress that the O-RAN Alliance have done in the past years. Actually, if I go back in time, I still remember one of the very first O-RAN Alliance meeting in 2018, and I remember that the entire O-RAN Alliance community was fitting in a single room, and we didn't even fill all the chairs. But now the community has enlarged a lot, and this has grown a lot. O-RAN Alliance as a standardization body, it has matured a lot in the quality of the produced specification and in the participation of different vendors and operators. So there is a lot of work and tremendous work that the O-RAN Alliance has done. And another aspect that is very important is that now the O-RAN Alliance is becoming to some extent more global by submitting specification through ETSI pass process, so that they actually go into FRAND terms and have broader reach, because more companies are actually part of ETSI as a standard organization. So this is actually very important to enable global adoption of this specification. So we should keep in mind that the O-RAN Alliance is playing a very important role here. Then, of course, going forward, and especially when 6G comes into play, we need to think how O-RAN Alliance and 3GPP will work together. What we want to avoid, of course, is duplication of specification. We need to make sure that O-RAN Alliance and 3GPP continue to work in a complementary way and not in a conflicting way. And that can also lead to the fact that some aspects could be moved from the O-RAN Alliance into 3GPP when it comes to 6G specification. What aspect exactly needs to be discussed and agreed, of course, but that could be one way to avoid fragmentation, which is extremely important.
Absolutely. And nicely said, Matteo. And I think it's really important to say that the O-RAN Alliance has done a lot of extremely good work over the years and continues to do so. But where's the next step? The future of Open RAN, what sort of linkages is it making with not just 3GPP, but ETSI and other associations? Beth, let's come to you for your thoughts on this one, and then we'll get some additional thoughts after.
So speaking as a person who's very active in the LFN, Linux Foundation networking, I was very heartened by seeing that there's a number of projects that are in alliance. I'm actually going to be working on, there's O-Cloud, which is the infrastructure piece. And, Aniket is the project within LFN, which is the set of infrastructure, it's a reference model, reference architectures that support these types of workloads. So I'm going to be exploring, the synergies there. Also, I know that there's some work to move some of this stuff into GSMA. Which is also, a telco standards body, if you will, that supports the requirements documentation. So I'm very heartened to see that yes, that the O-RAN Alliance is not sort of a standalone, hey, we don't talk to anybody else kind of organization. It's really looking piggyback on all the great work that other standards bodies and open source organizations have done in this area already.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. And it's not just about moving towards more work into 3GPP, but it's also bringing on board all the other associations that are doing parallel activities and broadening out that community of work. Ian, let's get your thoughts, please.
I really liked Matteo's comments here on, the fact that this open approach in disaggregating things has exposed kind of the complexity that was hidden by the perform proprietary ones. I think Patrick said the same thing. But in terms of, where do we do the work? What I'm also really happy about how the O-RAN Alliance works is that they actually look at, let's take advantage of some ITU specs that are really important, IEEE specs for synchronization, these kind of things that already exist, rather than let's recreate the wheel that's already there. And then how do we connect the work in GSMA and IEEE and the O-RAN Alliance? And of course, as Beth mentioned, make sure that we have connections into sort of the cloud native world and deal with the other interfaces that we know we're going to need to do open lifecycle management, and then apply the benefits of analytics and AI for not just for performance, but also for the ability to drive down the power consumption through our sustainability efforts. And that's another piece that's going on, if you will, within different aspects of the GSMA.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. And the more we work on this, more groups work on this, the more we'll get done. I'm going to expand this out in a second too, because Matteo mentioned 6G earlier. But before I do that, I'm just going to go across to Rick for your thoughts on how the initial work, and so much of it's been done by O-RAN Alliance, how this might get expanded and enhanced.
Well, I think it's maybe more of a request and where I think it needs to go. And we hope we get there is in addition to the specifications and the technology, and I think bringing in specifications and technology from other industries, especially cloud, and again, it's just bringing in more capabilities into this industry, which is fantastic. But we really, to get to the end state, I think we need some kind of a product certification, accreditation type of a lab situation where it can become just much more plug and play. That's going to take some time, but I think the standards bodies need to take that up and make sure that's kind of built in as part of this.
Great. Thanks very much, Rick. Well, I'm going to come across to Patrick now, but I'm also going to expand the question and move on a little, because I also like to ask about whether or not Open RAN can become more generational agnostic and what impact it might have on possible 6G scenarios and candidate technologies, because it all kind of flows together, these two questions. So, Patrick, what do you think?
I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, at least briefly, the Telecom Infra project, which at the beginning, at least, of Open RAN was a great promoter. Before there was the O-RAN Alliance, I remember one of the team that was leading at Telefonica wrote the first RFI on Open RAN publicly with Vodafone at the time, and published the result and started really the work. And it was very different because it was not specification, it was actually testing, it was actually putting people together, companies together, and creating the foundation. So even though the tip has moved on to other projects, even though it's still a part of Open RAN, I think they deserve a mention here. And that goes to your question, how do we see Open RAN in a multi-generational activity going towards 6G? And probably Open RAN was one of the first technologies that was very early on designed to be multi-generational, in the sense that it was created originally for 5G, but very quickly operators were saying, well, we're not going to deploy 5G in isolation. We're going to deploy 5G on top of our existing network, and it's going to be really difficult to deploy 5G on Open RAN and then keep 2G, 3G, 4G on existing technologies. And some vendors took it onto themselves to create Open RAN versions that are 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G capable. And from that perspective, it was already multi-generational. And when we look forward at 6G, I think that most of the people on that panel will agree that it's not a question of whether Open RAN will be part of 6G. Open RAN will be part of 6G and will be one of the architecture and one of the deployment options within the 6G environment, just by the virtue that basically those interfaces, the philosophy of open and disaggregated network is now permeating a lot of part of 6G, even outside of the RAN itself. So Open RAN, if you want, is prefigured a lot of the precepts of architecture for 6G.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thanks for referencing TIP there for its early work. We had TIP on one of our panels yesterday where we looked at the RIC. Ian, let me come across to you. Is Open RAN already multi-generational?
I think Rick said it was sort of, because of it being a open kind of approach and being cloud native by nature and distributed, 6G is its evolution to bring by more value on top of this infrastructure to enable those enterprise capabilities, the AI capabilities. That kind of just fits into how this is going to evolve in this journey. And there's no end state, if you will, but I do agree with Rick that we need more things like we have the OREX in Japan, which is testing variations of the multiple flavors of how we interconnect the puzzle pieces. But there's also another group that's been formed in the last couple of years, also driven by our friends at NTT in Japan. I was at their members meeting just a couple of weeks ago in Vancouver, and they're seeing an evolution that includes the mobile side of the world. And so people are in a working group now looking at use cases to actually improve the distances that Open RAN can actually support by putting photonic networks into that backhaul and front haul scenario, right? So there's another expansion potential coming out of yet another form where people are looking at how do we improve the capabilities of delivering these kinds of services around the world, using photonics to drive down latency between data centers and also out in the front haul and back haul.
Options are increasing there. That's interesting, Ian. Thanks for that update. And Beth, what are your thoughts on Open RAN and how it's positioned as generational agnostic and what it can do for, we hate to say 6G, but we're going to have to, 6G?
So I think that Open RAN is very definitely thinking about the future and really architected to support multi-generations. But 6G is very definitely still, I wouldn't call it a sunniest project. It's probably a little beyond that. But I don't think the requirements are really fixed enough to really say that Open RAN can work toward supporting it, because it's not really crystallized enough. But I think Open RAN is architected in a way that allows it the flexibility to support new generations of technology and new generations of thinking. AI. Hey, we had to bring it up sometime. AI and machine learning, are what I heard is that 6G is going to incorporate those aspects of that of the technology, and Open RAN has to be ready to support that. So I think it is, or it will be, but again, it's still very cloudy.
Okay, thanks very much, Beth. Let's come across to Matteo. What are your thoughts on Open RAN and how it's positioned for future? What lies beyond 5G and being generationally agnostic?
I think that Open RAN is definitely a generational agnostic to some extent. Of course, today it's designed to support mostly 4G and 5G, and the architecture has been optimized for that. When it comes to 6G, I think one key question we need to address is what are the 6G use cases? What are we really building 6G for? And then based on that, we need to understand how the Open RAN architecture can evolve to meet those use cases that we want for 6G. There need to be an evolution of the Open RAN architecture to be able to tackle 6G and all the relevant use cases. There is no question that Open RAN will evolve in that direction, but to understand exactly how that will look like, I think the first key question we need to address is really, what are we building 6G for? What are the key 6G use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matteo. And hopefully that's what I was going to say 5 years away, but it might not be. Hopefully that's 4 or 5 years away. And looking more at the medium term, a final question for you. Can we outline a likely and honest scenario for Open RAN in the years ahead, maybe like 2 or 3 years ahead? What is the future roadmap of Open RAN? And Rick, could we start with you?
Sure, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to try to set aside my Open RAN Kool-Aid and be pragmatic about this. But I think if you look at the situation today, we have Open RAN has been very successful in standalone networks where there's not any existing barriers to entry, right? You look at Dish Network in the US, 20,000 sites, Japan, lots of SA enterprise networks around the world. Radio availability is good, variety of RAN vendors. It's been there. But the majority of the deployments that could go to Open RAN are in the future. So if you consider what's happening with pilots, lots of pilots announced across Europe, North America, Asia, those are in progress. We start to see this brownfield scale out happening, really ramping up probably next year as these pilots get completed. And multiple companies are involved with those types of pilots. And so as we get through 25, 26, 27 and start to scale this out, we will see a significant share of modernization projects, replacement projects will be O-RAN, and that's been mandated. All the vendors are aligned, and so if vendors come through with their roadmaps or the ones that are already there, we will see that in the next 5 years really start to get some significant volume in the market, and we're well on our way to get there. So good start. We're scaling out. We haven't. We don't talk about, is it possible? It's not a science project anymore. And now it's just we still have some barriers to entry. We have a lot of installed base that's not Open RAN. It's Open RAN capable, but it hasn't been integrated. But as we do modernization, we'll see those types of networks will convert to Open RAN. And I think majority of the industry is behind that now, and we're pushing forwards.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rick. And we covered brownfield commercial scenarios in a panel yesterday, and there's a lot more to learn on that. Let's go to Petr next. You've been so closely involved with Open RAN. What's your thoughts of the next 2 or 3 years? What's your roadmap?
Yes, I would definitely build up on what was said here before. So I would definitely subscribe to that. We should be seeing increased adoption and deployments, as mentioned. At the moment, we see already scaled deployment, especially from the greenfield deployments, but we already have also committed from the major brownfield carriers. So we will see the deployments scaling in the brownfield environment as the renewal cycles are coming, and of course by then it is important that we are able to move to the horizontal model of architecture and break the silos. And of course solve also the integration challenge. What we will be also seeing is the advancements in hardware and software developments that will again improve on performance and efficiency parameters that we need in the large scale deployments and in the complex configuration, and also especially in the software development to see the adoption that is allowing Cloud RAN approaches and required automation, as well as mentioned SMO and management layers with the evolved management interfaces, and last but not least, of course, AI/ML based optimization solutions that will help us to contribute to all the maturity, performance, and efficiency parameters that we need to achieve.
Thanks very much, Petr. Lots to do still, but lots to look out for as well in the years ahead. We've got a few more views to get in before we close the panel. So, Ian, let me come across to you next.
So I think I agree with kind of what Rick and Matteo and team were talking about here in terms of where things are going in terms of Open RAN itself. But as we kind of got started, the next place for Open RAN is kind of actually in the private wireless kind of world, where that's how I'm going to go deliver these enterprise services on that same horizontal cloud platform that we talk about, right? So that's kind of the next sort of thing we need to kind of, get moving on and get those use cases that Matteo talked about. How do we go solve for those? But there's a couple of other things that are actually in play we kind of need to make sure we work on, which is, as we all know, the amount of power being consumed in the network is, majority in the radios, but also in the DUs and CUs that are, part of the architecture, right? So, Red Hat and Intel came up with an open source project to go look at the, power consumption by the processors in Linux and cloud native platforms, and to kind of drive down that, that approach. But in the advent of, opening up the world, right, we have AI capabilities today, predictive analytics, that actually speak to the back channels of the radios today to actually go adjust them for performance, et cetera, on the fly. And we need to kind of open up how we do that to drive down power consumption for sustainability purposes, with more of open interfaces for that purpose, right? That go not just to the CUs and DUs that happen to run on, standard COTS hardware, but all the way to the radios who are much more customized hardware at this point as that evolves. So sustainability is kind of another big piece of the puzzle that we need to kind of work through. But this all leads to, okay, we're building this highway, making it open, expanding it out. But if we actually want to get to those enterprise deliverable services on an open platform, right? We know we can't do that with traditional RAN, right? We need to actually put all these things, CUs, DUs, RUs, UPS, and other applications on a common platform at the edge to go deliver those services. And Open RAN is helping drive to that path.
Very interesting. Thanks very much, Ian, for those observations. Beth, I'll come across to you next, please.
So I want to pick up on several things. One that Ian said, and then Rick also. Several people have mentioned the tech refresh. I think particularly the larger telecoms where there's brownfield. I think we're going to see more Open RAN coming in as tech refresh kicks in. We would have to replace the equipment every so often. And we saw this with SD-WAN, as companies had to do tech refresh on the routers, they brought in SD-WAN. So I expect to see sort of similar types of incorporation of O-RAN into our infrastructures, particularly with the larger telecoms that have the more difficult brownfields. Another area that I see O-RAN really stepping up and being a really good fit for is the fixed wireless access, which is, of course, growing. And that includes the private wireless as well as just the subscription-based fixed wireless access. So, there's great opportunity for those, O-RAN boxes, to scale it down to be those single router antenna boxes that we need to support the support the FWA implementations. So I see great opportunity for O-RAN to really be a really good fit for those use cases.
Thank you very much, Beth. And Patrick, based on what you see analyzing the market, how do you extrapolate this? Where do you see the roadmap and the path ahead for Open RAN over the next few years?
I think there are a couple of possible scenarios for the evolution of Open RAN. And pragmatically, if you're an operator and you're looking at introducing a new technology such as Open RAN and possibly a new vendor, this is a huge undertaking just because introducing a new technology in the RAN is expensive and lengthy. And introducing new vendor is also expensive and lengthy, generally speaking, in telecoms. So we're starting to see a trend, let's say, in operators wanting to deploy something that is, let's say, Open RAN capable, and even Open RAN, but with maybe not a lot of variation in terms of number of vendors. Maybe either a single vendor option, and when I say single vendor, I mean for the radio and the CUDU, or maybe CUDU and radio from a single vendor with maybe another vendor for other radios. And I think that's fine pragmatically to get started, to get deployed, right? I think that we're going to see over the next few years, though, possibly for the first time, vendors that are not traditional radio vendors are going to bring something that is unique or that is very different from other vendors. And you mentioned the Rick earlier. This is probably where we see the most innovation, the most efforts regarding the integration of machine learning, deep learning, and AI into networks, generally speaking. And we're starting to see signs of companies that are not necessarily radio vendors traditionally, that come up with algorithmics that can actually change quite radically the way we deploy and the way we manage radio networks, either from a spectrum efficiency standpoint or from a power consumption standpoint, or from a traffic management standpoint. And I think that as those new technologies and new vendors start to mature in the market, there is a chance here that really accelerates and change a lot the way we think about deploying networks in the near future.
Right. Thanks very much, Patrick, for those insights. And we've just got time to go across to Matteo for your thoughts on the future direction of Open RAN.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think a lot have already been said. So what I maybe want to highlight is just three quick things. First is that definitely adoption will continue to grow. We are in trials and soon in deployments, and some of them will become large scale. Also, I expect with brownfield operators. The two things that I think will help to go in that direction is one is what we define as pre-integrated solution. So especially in the early days of Open RAN, to mask a little bit of the complexity of the system integration, having vendors to partner and doing pre-integration is one great solution to be able to accelerate solutions that are ready for the customer and ready for deployment. The second important aspect to make this deployment successful is actually that we need to be able to meet the performance and KPIs of traditional networks, also with cloud native and open network. That is something that is challenging overall because especially for large operators, this can involve the coordination of many different frequency layers that are deployed in different ways. So this could be a challenge that need to be addressed to be able to deploy at scale. But we do see that this is the direction we are going.
Great. Thank you very much, Matteo. We must leave it there, though, although I am sure we will continue this debate during our live Q&A show later. For now, thank you to all our guests for taking part in our discussion. If you're watching this on day 2 of our Open RAN Summit, then please send us your questions and we'll answer them in our live Q&A show, which is coming up later. The full schedule of programs and speakers can be found on the TelecomTV website, which is where you'll also find the Q&A form and our poll question. For now, though, thanks for watching and goodbye.